Thanksgiving has always been the one holiday my family takes seriously. No matter how spread out we get, everyone returns to my parents' old farmhouse in Pennsylvania. The house is big, isolated, and surrounded by nothing but quiet fields and bare trees. I used to love the atmosphere, warm lights inside, cold wind outside, and the smell of food drifting through every room. But last year's Thanksgiving is something I still have trouble talking about. I'm not sure how to explain it in a way that makes sense, because even now it feels unreal. But it happened, and it changed the way I feel about being home for the holidays forever. I arrived the night before Thanksgiving. My parents, my sister, my uncles, and 2 cousins were already there. We were expecting a total of 12 people. The house always feels crowded on Thanksgiving, which is part of the charm. Except this time, something felt wrong the moment I stepped inside. For one, the living room lights were off. That never happens. Usually the house is glowing like a beacon when guests start arriving. But when I walked in, the only light came from the kitchen. The rest of the house was dim, almost gloomy. Second, the front door was unlocked. My parents never leave it unlocked, especially at night. I called out, "Hello," expecting a loud, cheerful response. Instead, only my mom answered from the kitchen, sounding distracted. "We're in here." Everyone was gathered around the table, prepping food. They smiled at me, hugged me, made jokes. Everything seemed normal enough, but there was a tension in the air that I couldn't quite place. My mom looked tired. My dad kept glancing toward the hallway. Even my usually loud cousins spoke in quieter voices. It wasn't until later that night that I learned they'd had a weird experience earlier in the evening. Around 6 p.m., someone had knocked on the door. When my dad opened it, no one was there. Just cold wind and an empty porch. They assumed it was a prank. But 10 minutes later, it happened again. Knocking. No one. Then, around 7 p.m., the knocking sounded a third time, but this time it came from the back door. My uncle went to check. Again, nothing. They had locked every door after that. Or at least they thought they did. I didn't like hearing this. The farmhouse is far out from any main road. You don't just stop by unless you're intentionally coming there. Still, we try to shake it off. We finished prepping the food, cleaned up, and eventually everyone headed to their rooms. I was staying in the upstairs guest room, the one facing the backyard. I've slept in that room every Thanksgiving of my life. But around 1:30 a.m., I woke up to something tapping on the window. Not knocking, tapping. Light, rhythmic. My first thought was that it was just a tree branch. But when I opened my eyes fully, I remembered something disturbing. There are no trees close enough to reach that window. I sat up slowly. The tapping stopped. I waited, listening to the house. The old pipes hummed. The floor creaked, as they usually do when the temperature drops. Then the tapping returned, but lower this time, like fingernails dragging upward along the outside of the wall. I didn't want to look, but something in me wouldn't let me ignore it. I got out of bed silently and walked toward the window. The glass was fogged from the cold outside, meeting the warm inside. When I reached up to wipe the glass, there was a face, right on the other side of the window, pressed up against it, staring directly at me. I froze. My hand was still halfway raised. The face was pale, eyes wide, hair wild like it hadn't been washed in months. Its breath fogged the glass with every exhale. And the eyes, something was wrong with them. They were too wide, too focused. I stumbled backward and nearly fell. My heart felt like it was trying to burst through my chest. And then the face smiled. Not a normal smile. A slow, unnatural curl of the lips that stretched wider than a human smile should. I ran. I grabbed my door and sprinted down the hallway toward my parents' room. Before I could even knock, my dad swung the door open. He was already awake, holding a baseball bat. My mom looked terrified behind him. "You saw him too," she said. I didn't understand. "What do you mean, too?" My mom swallowed. About an hour after you went to bed, someone walked past the kitchen window. That window is 7 feet above the ground. My uncle and dad had already checked the entire house. All windows locked. All doors locked. But I'd seen a face at the upstairs window. We woke everyone up and gathered in the living room. No one slept after that. My dad and uncle stood guard near the front and back doors. I stayed close to my sister. Around 4 a.m., just before sunrise, we heard footsteps on the porch. Slow, deliberate. Heavy. Everyone went silent. Then came a knock. Not frantic, not loud. A soft, steady knock. My dad whispered to my uncle, "Call the police." My uncle pulled out his phone, only to find that all of our phones had no signal. Not even a single bar. We were in a dead zone. That was impossible. We never had service issues before. The knocking came again. My dad lifted the bat and approached the door slowly. Everyone else backed away. He looked through the peephole and stepped back with a gasp. "There's someone standing there." Nobody breathed. "What does he look like?" my mom whispered. My dad swallowed. I don't know if it's a man." Just then, the knock turned into a scraping against the door. Then a soft laugh. A high-pitched, distorted giggle that sent chills down my spine. My sister grabbed my hand. "What does he want?" No one answered. Then we heard something else. A voice, muffled through the door, whispering, "Let me in, it's cold." We all froze. The voice wasn't normal. It sounded strained. Wrong. Like someone forcing their vocal cords to mimic speech. Then, suddenly, the police sirens echoed down the driveway. We had never been so relieved to hear anything in our lives. My dad yanked the door open as the officers approached. But when they got to the porch, they looked confused. What was the emergency? "There was someone here," my dad said. They were. No one was on the road when we drove up, the officer interrupted. We would have seen them. We insisted. We begged them to search the property. They did, and they found something. Behind the house, near the backyard window, the one I'd been sleeping beside, they found footprints. Deep ones, bare footprints, and scratch marks on the siding. Long, vertical scratches, about 7 feet high. The officer frowned. "You're sure none of you sleepwalk?" "No," my mom whispered. One of the officers pulled my dad aside and said quietly, "We've had reports in the area. Someone trespassing around rural homes. But the descriptions," he hesitated, "they're inconsistent. They recommended we keep all doors locked for a while and call again if anything happened." We didn't have Thanksgiving dinner that day. Everyone packed up and left before noon. We haven't had Thanksgiving at the farmhouse since. The house is still there, empty, waiting. And sometimes I think about that smile at the window, about how high it was, about how something climbed the side of our house effortlessly, about the voice at the door whispering, "Let me in." And every Thanksgiving night, even now, I swear I can still hear it in my head. I was driving back home on the Saturday night after Thanksgiving weekend. My family lives 3 states away, so every year I make the long drive alone. It's 8 hours of mostly empty highway, farmland, and forest. I always leave late to avoid traffic, but that also means I'm on the road when it's pitch black and freezing out. It was around 11:45 p.m. when the rain started. Not heavy, but that annoying misty kind that sticks to the windshield and makes the road look blurry. I hadn't seen another car in almost 20 minutes. Just my headlights cutting through fog, with the occasional mailbox or mile marker flashing past. My gas tank was a little below a quarter. Normally, that would have been fine, but the stretch I was on had no stations for at least 30 miles. I sighed and kept driving. That's when I saw him. A figure standing on a shoulder, barely visible in the fog. At first I thought it was just a sign or a pole, but as I got closer, I realized it was a man, standing completely still, facing the road. I slowed down instinctively. I couldn't help it. Something about seeing another person after so long alone on the road felt strange and somehow relieving. When my headlights fully illuminated him, I immediately regretted slowing down. He was drenched from head to toe, wearing a hooded jacket that looked too thin for the weather. He wasn't waving for help. He wasn't crying. He wasn't even shivering. He was just standing there, staring directly into my car. I should have kept going, but when I passed him, I looked into my rearview mirror, and something in me cracked. Maybe guilt, maybe fear, maybe the holiday spirit still lingering. It was late. It was cold, and he was out there completely alone. So like an idiot, I pulled over. My brake lights lit up the fog behind me, and after a few seconds, the guy started walking toward the car. He didn't run, didn't wave, didn't even pick up his pace. Just walked like he knew I wasn't leaving. I unlocked the door. He opened it slowly and sat down without saying a word. Water dripped from his jacket onto my seat. You okay, man?" I asked. He didn't respond. He just stared straight ahead. "Where you headed?" Silence. Up close, I could see more details. His skin was pale, like disturbingly pale. His hair was plastered to his forehead from the rain. And his eyes looked bloodshot and unfocused, like he hadn't slept in days. Still, I put the car back in drive and started forward. We drove like that for a few minutes, the only sounds being the rain and my engine. I kept glancing over, waiting for him to finally speak. He just sat completely still. Eventually, I said, "Look, man, if you don't tell me where you're going, I can't take you anywhere." This time, he turned his head toward me, slowly, like it took effort. His voice, when he finally spoke, was barely above a whisper. "Gas station." There wasn't one anywhere near us. Maybe 20 minutes ahead, but I wasn't even sure it was open. "You're lucky," I said. "There's one coming up. I can drop you there." He didn't respond again. The atmosphere in the car started getting heavy. Like the air itself was hard to breathe. My nerves were starting to get the better of me, and I kept checking my mirrors. At one point, I caught him staring at me, not turning his head. His head was still facing forward, but his eyes were angled toward me, just watching. I gripped the wheel tighter. Finally, the low-fuel light on my dashboard beeped. At the same time, I saw the faded sign for a gas station up ahead. One of those old stops that looks abandoned, even when it's open. The building was completely dark, except for one flickering light on the sign. But at this point, I didn't care. I needed gas. I pulled in under the awning. "You can get out here," I said. The hitchhiker didn't move. "Hey, we're here." Still nothing. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. Then, without saying a word, he unbuckled his seatbelt and stepped out of the car. He walked slowly across the cracked pavement toward the building. Never looked back. I watched him approach the gas station's front door, which was clearly locked, and then disappear behind the building. Just vanish into the darkness. Something was wrong. Very wrong. I jumped out and hurried to the pump. I kept looking around, expecting to see him circling back toward me. I even checked under the awning in case he was hiding. When my tank was full, I got back into the car immediately. Just as I started the engine, movement caught my eye. The man was standing on the edge of the lot, in the same position as before, completely still, staring at me. Only now, he was farther from the lights, mostly in shadow. But I could see his eyes. They were reflecting my headlights in a way that didn't look natural. They looked bright, almost glowing. I panicked. I slammed the car into drive and sped out of the lot. I didn't even look back until I was back on the highway going 50. When I finally did, I almost swerved off the road. He was standing on the side of the highway again. The same stance. The same expressionless face. The same glowing eyes. The same exact spot I had picked him up earlier. There was no way he could have gotten there that fast. No shortcuts. No parallel roads. I floored it. For the next hour, every shadow, every sign, every roadside branch looked like him. I kept checking my back seat, half expecting him to be there. I didn't stop again until I reached home at nearly 3 a.m. When I finally walked inside and locked the door, I felt this overwhelming sense of dread. Like the night had followed me. I barely slept. The next morning, I looked up that road out of curiosity. Someone had posted in a local Facebook group. Did anyone else see the man on Route 17 last night, standing by the mile marker? My cousin swears he picked up someone just like that years ago, right before finding out a man had died there on Thanksgiving night in the 90s. I didn't comment, but I didn't need to. I knew exactly who they were talking about. And I will never, ever pick up a hitchhiker again, no matter how guilty I feel or how cold the night is. I hate crowds. Always have. So, naturally, the idea of going shopping on Black Friday was insane. But this year, I had no choice. My mom asked me to pick up a few things for Thanksgiving leftovers and her friends' holiday gifts. The mall was chaos. People pushing carts like they were gladiators, sale signs everywhere, and the smell of fried food mixed with the cold outside air. I moved quickly, trying to get in and out without anyone brushing up against me. I found a first item and rushed to the next store. That's when I noticed him. At first, I thought it was a coincidence. A man around my age, maybe late 20s, wearing a dark hoodie and jeans, standing near the entrance of every store I went into. I kept thinking, he's probably just shopping too. But then I saw him following me. Not aggressively, not running, just keeping pace. I tried ducking into an aisle, turning corners. Each time I peeked, he was there. watching, waiting. By the time I got my mom's final items, some canned pies and a small turkey, I realized I couldn't ignore it anymore. My stomach dropped. This wasn't a coincidence. I kept my head down, pretending to be absorbed in my phone while I made my way to the parking garage. The mall was massive, multi-level. Cars were parked everywhere, and the lot was mostly empty this late on Black Friday night. I kept glancing behind me. Sure enough, he was there. His hoodie pulled low over his face, hands stuffed in his pockets, moving slowly but deliberately. I reached my car, unlocked it, and climbed inside. My hand shook so badly I almost dropped my keys. As I started the engine, I saw him stop at the row of cars next to mine. He just stood there, watching, waiting. I locked the doors. My heart was racing so fast I could hear in my ears. I tried to tell myself it was fine. Maybe he was waiting for someone. Maybe he was just lost. I started driving. The exit to the street was long, with multiple turns and ramps. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror. He was following me. At first, I thought I was imagining it. But then I saw him step off the curb, into the street, and fall in step behind my car. My pulse doubled. I floored it. The streets were empty. I thought about calling the police, but I didn't want him to see me talking on my phone. And what would I even say? Some guy is walking behind me. I took a few sharp turns, hoping to lose him. He mirrored every movement. Turn left, he turns left. Turn right, he turns right. It was like a scene from a nightmare. One of those horror movies where the villain always finds you. Finally, I reached a quiet residential street. My house was just a few blocks away. I parked across the street, hiding behind a tree to see if he would follow me all the way. He did. I watched as he slowed down, then stopped at the corner. He didn't turn around, didn't run, just stood there, watching. I ran inside my house, slammed the door, and locked it. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely type my security alarm code. I called my mom, explained what happened in a frantic whisper, and she told me to wait until my dad came home from work. I stayed in the living room for an hour, peeking through blinds, listening. Every little sound outside made me jump. The wind, a car passing, the hum of a distant street lamp, but no one approached. The next morning, I went out to my car, hoping he had left. But on the windshield was a single note, written in messy block letters. See you next year. I didn't need to look around to know he wasn't far. That was the last straw. I reported it to the local police, but they said there was nothing they could do. The handwriting was too generic to trace, and there have been other Black Friday sightings in the same area. Every year since, I avoid them all entirely on Black Friday. Even driving past, it makes me anxious. What's worse is, I've noticed him once or twice in town, standing silently across the street or just at the edge of the parking lot. He never approaches me directly, never speaks, just watches. I know it sounds insane. I know it could be coincidence, but the timing, the behavior, the note, it all says otherwise. And every Thanksgiving, when I start thinking about holiday shopping, I get a pit in my stomach. Because I know he's probably out there somewhere, waiting,